and welcome to another episode of Greedy Keeps, brought to you by Moderately Anonymous MTG, the greatest cEDH channel in the multiverse. As always, this episode is brought to you by TCG Player. Hit that TCG Player affiliate link in the description to pick up any of the cards that you see in today's video. It's a great way to help out the channel. If you want to get an official Modanon playmat, make sure you pick one up through our Inked Gaming affiliate link. Want to make sure your cards stand out at the EDH table? Use our affiliate link to grab some altar sleeves and use code MODANONMTG at checkout for 5% off your order. And we're also partnered with Dragon Shield. Pick up the greatest card sleeves and TCG accessories in the multiverse and support the show. Make sure to visit our merch store to get some official Modanon merch. We've got t-shirts, sweatshirts, crew necks, and more with original Modanon designs. All of these links are in the video description below. And thank you to all of our patrons who make great content like this possible. Become a patron to enjoy Patreon exclusive content, give direct support to the channel, join our Patreon Discord, and even get your deck featured on the show. And remember, if you enjoy this video, it helps out a lot to click that like and subscribe button. It's one of the best ways to support the channel, and everyone is highly appreciated. Alright, hello everyone, my name is Dan, aka Moderately Anonymous MTG. I am here with Sluglord Cyrus from Mental Misplay. We're here to talk some Greedy Keeps about Toxrill. Cyrus, please, can you introduce yourself for everyone who may not have heard of you, and talk a little bit about the deck, what kind of win cons we're looking for, and things like that?
Yeah, so I'm Cyrus. I'm some percentage of Mental Misplay, mostly edit videos and stream a little bit over there. Otherwise, I'm just on Twitter. Toxrill, though, is a Dimir blue-black control list. These days, it sits very firmly in control. I've taken out ad nause, and I don't think it's on Pier anymore. It might, I don't know, Pier comes in and out. Yeah, so it's just a heavy control shell that wants to either ramp into a very quick Toxrill, like a turn 2 or 3 maybe kind of deal, depending on the pod, like against Najila or Winota, stuff like that. I will be looking for fast Toxrill hands, and against your typical Timnacrom, whatever fast looking kind of decks, I'm looking more for just hands with a bunch of counter spells.
Cool, that makes a lot of sense. I'm excited. I haven't really taken a look through the new Controlier shell that you have going on now, so I'm excited to see where it goes. Is there any sort of, is there a real threshold for where you like to be on keeps? Is it, hard to go below 5 or something like that? Is there any sort of, certain place you like to be? Or, what's the constitution of, a really good hand?
I wish I had it more down, and going into this, I'm I don't know, it might be, semi-embarrassing because I don't really know what a great keep is a lot of the times. I do a lot of it by feel more than anything, and pod composition. I feel I mean, this is probably something you hear often, just doing greedy keeps. I feel like most people probably throw this out, pod composition so important for what hand to keep, but I feel like that's especially true in a control deck, because you got to have the right things that counter the right things, or like I said, if I'm going for a fast Toxrill hand or for a heavy control hand. But I think going through these, it'll be easy enough to be this would be a keep against this kind of thing, or whatever. Typically, as far as number of cards, I don't go under 5 very often, just because it's hard, especially if you're the only blue deck at the table that's really in a control role and not just trying to protect its own stuff. It's real hard to have enough resources at under 5 cards.
Sure, especially now that we're not on Nas, we're not on Pier. Are we on Windfall, Time Twister?
I do have Time Twister in the deck. I feel like I am on Windfall, but
more limited refuel sources anyway, so I can understand wanting to keep an abundance of cards rather than, I don't know, having the exact nuts in whatever particular situation. And I think if the deck is flexible, it's flexible, I think it's good if you necessarily can't be well, I need X amount of ramp in this, you said it yourself, just turn 2 to 3 Toxrill is where you're trying to be most of the time, and filling in the control end of it is the other part of the deal, so I can understand that. Why don't we take a look at these greedy keeps here. Our first 7 that we got on screen is Brainstorm, Genstone Caverns, Mental Misstep, Mana Vault, Thassa's Oracle, Talisman of Dominance, and Soul Ring. This feels like a pretty safe keep.
Yeah, this, I mean, obviously I'm like really wanting a land off the top just so that the gemstone feels a little more useful. But either way, as long as I'm not first, this is a turn 2 Toxrill. So I would be very likely to keep it. Probably pitching. The decision between the Brainstorm or the Mental Misstep is really hard, actually, on which to pitch for the Gemstone Caverns.
I suppose to bring it back to what you said, depends on pod composition, because like if we see a few white decks and we're afraid of Deafening Silence that would fold this hand in half, that's something that we definitely want to keep the misstep up for.
Yeah, especially if we're going after them. Because this deck actually, like, just something in general is that it doesn't really mind playing underneath a Rule of Law. It can make counter battles obviously awkward, but I'm happy to just land Toxrill and be like, okay, here we go. I just, counter one thing per cycle and attack with a slug. But I think in general I'd probably be I don't know, it really would depend, but I'd probably be ditching the Mental Misstep just because I love drawing cards so much.
Yeah, the Brainstorm is very enticing, especially where we are hoping to hit more land drops. So yeah, I can definitely see that. And like you said, if Deafening Silence isn't going to be the end of this hand, like I suppose it will probably slow down a turbo deck a lot more than it's going to slow us down in this situation. So I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's take a look at another one. This is easy peasy. I hope we just got straight first sevens every time. Well, I don't know. Here we go. First, our next one is Felwar Stone, Flooded Strand, Underground Sea, Mana Vault, Scalding Tarn, Preordain, and Dark Confidant. So we've potentially got a turn 1 Dark Confidant, which seems very solid for where we want to be with this kind of a thing.
Yeah, turn 1 Dark Confidant always feels great. It's definitely a little land heavy without, like, it's a little mana heavy without getting all the way to Toxrill, which is an issue that the deck has, where it's like ramping into 6 mana is actually sometimes just a lot of dead cards that could be interaction.
And another point of like getting out our Dark Confidant turn 1 is we are going to have to spend this Mana Vault, which is a lot of our ability to get to Toxrill. So that's a pretty huge tempo swing to us, depending on what we draw off the top with Dark Confidant and our natural draw steps.
Yeah, now you do have the Preordain to smooth out a little bit too. I think honestly, most days I'm keeping this hand.
It seems solid. I mean, again, for a deck that wants to keep a lot of cards in its hand, this is going to do that.
Yeah, and the Mana Vault, there are a lot of ways to get it back up and running in the deck, just a decent amount of like bounce stuff. So it could potentially come back online without me having to dump 4 mana into it later. And a lot of times, there's a lot of games that I play with this deck and a lot of games that I've won without ever casting Toxrill. Sometimes you just have to accept that 7 mana is not going to happen, or it'll just be a good plan B for if, there is a stacks deck and I end up, the game just goes on forever.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of the Dimir shell in general, but especially of the Toxrill list, because Toxrill is such a really potent like combo piece and control piece. But like at the end of the day, we've just got good Dimir cards, which is also just fine.
Yep. Exactly.
Well, nice. We got another. We got another first 7 non-greedy keep. Let's keep going. Let's go for number 3. Number 3 is Isochron Scepter, Polluted Delta, Lotus Petal, Demonic Tutor, Wishclaw Talisman, Reign of Filth, and Gilded Drake. So important to note that we are on Isochron Scepter combo. So we do have presumably A plus B in the Demonic Tutor or the Wishclaw Talisman, but it seems like this is probably not where we want to be. What does this hand look like to you?
It's garbage, honestly. Like the only situation in which I keep this hand is if I'm like looking to turn 1 Gilded Drake someone's very scary commander, like maybe a Najila or a Selvala in the right situations. But like this looks more like a 5 that I would keep than a 7, so I would be mulling this one for sure.
Sure, that makes sense. Given if it were lower down, we could just be Demonic Tutoring for like a Mana Crypt or something like that to start putting us ahead on board a little bit. But yeah, at 7, I don't think this will do it. Let's take a look at our second 7 here. Second 7 is Muddle the Mixture, Command Tower, Snow-Covered Island, Ponder, Mana Crypt, Dress Down, and Douthie Voidwalker. So it's a pretty solid hand. You can't shake your head at a turn 1 Ponder, but I guess it doesn't really. Nothing in this hand really sets itself up for the next thing in the hand. It seems sort of like we've got a spattering of good cards, but not a great plan with it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Having no like in-hand access to get that Dothy Voidwalker out is pretty rough. Muddle the Mixture often to me feels like one of the weaker cards in the deck because that 3 transmute is so pricey.
I just cut it from Kess because I'm honestly thinking that we're probably beyond. We have enough technology where Muddle the Mixture is probably no longer as relevant as it was a year ago.
Yeah, and I find myself, I mean, it's like, I don't know the actual numbers, but it feels like 1 in maybe 10 games that I'm actually trying to tutor up combo pieces. Most of the time I'm going for something else, either mana or just like an Ants or a Gilded Drake or something like that, which I guess Gilded Drake you can't get from Muddle, but I don't know, it just feels so slow most of the time. So I don't know, if I'm being honest, it like is probably a hand that a lot of times I'd be like, I'll just try it and hope for the Ponder, but I lose those games. So let's mulligan this one and see what the 6 would look like.
Well, to be fair to that angle, like, we've got a Ponder, which is a great spell for sort of, we can't change the composition of our hand too much with it, but we get to control a little bit what's going on. And having Dress Down is a really, really nice, like, just backup piece for whatever might be happening at the table. Dress Down stops most really popular winning combos in the meta right now, so it's not particularly bad. But yeah, I agree. Without the Douthie, without a good plan for the Douthie here, I think easy shit. Let's go to
without the Douthie and without like a guaranteed way to get the Dress Down cast after the Ponder. It's like, I don't know, it feels like a hand that I would regret keeping, so I want to see what
yeah.
6 would look like instead.
Let's go ahead. Let's take a look at a 6. 6 is Mana Drain, Necropotence, Exotic Orchard, Prismatic Vista, Dress Down again, Brainstorm, and Slip Out the Back. I have to read this one. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and it phases out. Is that more of a protection or a removal spell, or is it just, like, thankfully both?
I love that it's both. I don't know that it deserves a slot, but I've used it exactly 1 time to great effect, and I have held it in hand and felt really good about having a 1-mana way to save Toxrill. Didn't end up like needing it, but it was there to do that. It's just so good at hitting a Dranith right before my turn.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, protecting Toxrill, because Toxrill gets targeted down all the time. But that said, at 6, I think this hand is not there. That's my initial thought, is that it's very slow, and I'm just like, sort of like the last hand, banking on the Ponder. This one is leaning on that Brainstorm.
I was just about to say, yeah, we're betting the entire game plan on this Brainstorm, changing up the composition of this hand in a way that's favorable. And yeah, just like, we need to hit like pretty much exactly Dark Ritual to make this hand really pay off in a way that works very well. So yeah, I mean that or Cabal Ritual, I guess, presumably, since we'd be going to, well, maybe turn 2 with it, depending on how we want to set it up, if we want that fetch land to potentially break up the Brainstorm. But yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at 5. We can do better than this. Our 5 is Grim Monolith, Isochron Scepter, Force of Negation, the Meat Hook Massacre, Douthie Voidwalker, Arcane Signet, Limb Duel's Vault. So unfortunately, we did not do better on the 5.
Yeah, it didn't get there with this one. That's a ship for sure.
Very close. If we had a mana source, it'd be a lot better. So our 4 here is Mystical Tutor, Mana Drain, and Offer You Can't Refuse, Swan Song, Cyclonic Rift, Transmute Artifact, and Morphic Pool. So I'd have to assume that given the assumption that we're in a real game right now, we're pretty much in the position where we feel like we're not going to be able to win this game very well, so we're obviously going to have to go to 3, I think. Unless, I don't know, what do we think about the Mystical Tutor? Does that change the composition of this hand at all?
Mystical Tutor doesn't do a whole lot here.
We can tutor for a bit of mana or a bit of interaction, but like, the mana's not pushing us towards anything that's in the hand in particular. We've already got plenty of interaction.
I'll give this hand is that at 4, it does have 1 land and a number of spells it can actually cast, which is like interesting.
One thing that's really nice about an Offer You Can't Refuse is it means that it turns a shitty top deck like Mox Diamond or something like that into at least a little bit of something if we want to go down the route of offering it.
Yeah, at this, like, going down to 3 feels like I can't imagine a 3 that's gonna feel better than just bottoming the 3 2 CMC cards and I mean, you're mainly sitting there with Swan Song and Offer You Can't Refuse and like praying that the game goes long.
Well, all right. So all right. Let's say we're keeping here. Let's see what our first draw is and see if we get paid off at all. It's a delay, so that's not great. Next one is a Mox Diamond, so it does open us up to that offer line, which is not too bad. Well, since we're here and in the spirit of greedy keeps, let's take a look at what a 3 might look like, just for some science. We've got Mystic Remora, Mana Confluence, Marsh Flats, Peer into the Abyss, Cephalid Coliseum, Mental Misstep, and a delay. So it seems
still on Pier in this at this time. That's good.
Oh, yeah. It seems like this isn't the worst. Like I think
this is actually.
be...
I mean, yeah. I mean, if I am going first or second, I'm like, thank Jeebus, we've got a Mystic Remora, and we just keep it and hope to get back in the game. So I think that definitely would have been a better Multa 3 than the keep at 4 on that.
So if we're keeping here, do you think that we keep 2 lands, or are we looking at that Mental Misstep as a third?
It's super tempting to keep the Misstep. I don't know that it's...
Yeah, I feel like at 3 we just can't afford to be in the seat of Mental Misstepping anything.
Yeah, it's extremely greedy keeps to keep the Misstep over land 2, but...
On the other side of that, though, actually, is the Mental Misstep is going to save our Mystic Remora from an opposing Mental Misstep, which is going to be everything for holding this hand together.
That's a really good point. Yeah, the Misstep for the counter war. I mean, you know, sitting at a table looking at it, I could see going with Remora Confluence and or I guess we just keep the fetch land.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense.
Yeah, but Remora fetch land and Misstep.
Probably and just depends on like seat and pod comp a little bit, depending on where we want to be with that last one. But
I mean, this whole plan it just scoops to being in 4th, basically. The 4th place Remora just feels so bad. So yeah, it's some sort of keep at 3 for sure. I wouldn't go any lower.
It's a greedy one for sure.
Probably, honestly.
Yeah, I think
once you're here, it's like I gotta just hope that I can interact in some way and do something meaningful in this game. So,
and you would want to like rely on your pod mates to like not have you in the position where you are one player who has a singular land and nothing else going on.
Yeah,
like it's certainly better for the health of the table if you have at least something to contribute. So, all right, well, let's take a look at a fresh 7 here. Fresh 7 is Forbidden Orchard, Opposition Agent, Talisman of Dominance, Ancient Tomb, Time Twister, Watery Grave, and Douthie Voidwalker. So this seems like a really good keep.
Yeah, I'd be super stoked on this one. Not like the flashiest turn 1, but an Ancient Tomb into a Talisman is like... It's honestly, sometimes I prefer to have hands like this when I'm looking at it than the ones like the other one I saw where it was like Soul Ring into Mana Vault, because it doesn't get just turned off by a Rule of Law effect, so I can just happily know that is what I'm going to do turn 1. And
honestly, a Rule of Law would almost be amazing for this hand because it is like it's not slow, but like we are deploying these pieces one at a time because of their individual mana costs and like the way that we're going to have our mana on turn 1 and 2. Which way do you think that you would be inclined to sequence this? Are we holding up Opposition Agent on turn 2, or are we trying to transition into Douthie Voidwalker before we go for a Twister?
Gonna be super like pod dependent and also like first rotation dependent. Like if it feels like Opposition Agent's already missed a few targets, like a couple fetch lands and someone already has Enlightened Tutored or whatever in that, you know, before I'm able to cast it, I'm just going to go turn 2 Voidwalker and start going that direction. If not, if it feels like, you know, maybe turn 2 is when a 2-cost tutor of some degree is going to be coming down, or maybe I'm first and I think I'm going to pass into a, you know, Vampiric Tutor or whatever, then I'm going to hold up the Opposition Agent. They're both just so good to have, though.
Yeah.
And Time Twister is a card I'm just like very afraid of casting. Like, so I definitely am going to, I mean, even if I do turn 2 Voidwalker, I'm probably more likely to hold wait to get the Opposition Agent down before throwing Time Twister down.
Sure, yeah. I mean, because we're not reaping the benefits off of people discarding anyway, and Time Twister I almost feel like is a better defensive than offensive spell for this deck, because like obviously we don't have like Simian Spirit Guide, Rite of Flame, Dockside Extortionist to pay off after getting a fresh 7. Like we're going to be taking a little bit of time to set up even after getting a fresh 7, so it seems like a thing that is like more often better used, being like, oh, well, all of the red tables who are about to draw into their Underworld Breaches have 15 cards in the graveyard. Let's scoop some of those up, just hit every player with an Endurance and keep going.
Yeah, it's been on the chopping block, especially because I run Mnemonic Betrayal, and it obviously Nonbo's there. The one reason it's still in, or like the thing that keeps me keeping it in, is that it is a backup win con for like a very niche thing that has yet to happen, where the Thoracle gets exiled and I am like low on cards in my library, and I have to go for the Toxrill Meat Hook Massacre win. And I need to have just something to reshuffle the graveyard into the library. And I think that comes more from just like 2 games in my early cEDH career or whatever, where some wild things like that happened and I was left with no win cons. I'm like, I better keep this like get out of jail free kind of card just in case this happens again. I don't know exactly what I'd change it out for either. So for now, Time Twister is there, and am I still on Thief? No, I did. The Notion Thief came out, so I don't know. We'll see how Time Twister does in the coming months. But,
I mean, to be fair, it's not like, it's got a reputation as like not a great card, and it is not the best card, but it's not a bad card. Like, unless you're talking to Ken Bauman, like it's still a pretty good card. It's not the worst like niche pet slot to have in your deck. So it's not indefensible for sure.
Exactly. It does the win con thing if I need it to, and sometimes you just need a fresh 7.
Yeah. All right, well, let's take a look at another fresh 7, speaking of. Next one is Arcane Signet, Forbidden Orchard, Chain of Vapor, Exotic Orchard, Demonic Consultation, Dramatic Reversal, and a Tainted Pact. So it's got the pieces, but it seems like sort of slow and no protection. What do you think here? Is this something that we can piece together over the long game, or do we want to ship this for something more aggressive?
These are the always punished hands. Like, keeping these is a massive trap as far as I'm concerned. Like, you just... It's slow. It just has a bunch of B's with no A's. It's just going nowhere. I would definitely ship this one.
Yeah, like there's something to be said for like we can start piecing together a plan with a very risky turn 1 Demonic Consultation, but like that seems like too far in the risky category, and just like we can formulate a better plan with our opening hand than that. Let's take a look at our second 7 then. Second 7 is Preordain, Marsh Flats, Rain of Filth, Hullbreaker Horror, Dispel, Island, and Jeweled Lotus. So it's got a fair bit of mana and the Preordain to like keep us popping in the early turns, Dispel, Hullbreaker Horror to eventually get to. What does this hand feel like to you?
I'd probably keep this as a second 7. The Jeweled Lotus is great. I've had Jeweled Lotus eat like a lot of interaction on Toxrill, especially if there's a creature-based deck. They will throw something at it, which I'm always pretty happy to trade 0 mana for however much mana they have to spend on it.
It's funny to think that like a Kraken Sakashima deck, for instance, or like a Najila deck, they really can't see you putting down an early Jeweled Lotus. So like you can even bait it out, like pre-land on turn 1, cast out the Jeweled Lotus, and just set off the alarms in the other players' minds and be like, oh no, here comes the Mana Vault and the Mana Crypt after that, I'm cooked.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I'd probably keep it. I mean, it is kind of leaning on that Preordain to find something to keep it going, but I'd love to have a draw spell and a piece of interaction and ramp all in the same hand. I feel like not keeping it would be pretty greedy. The Hullbreaker Horror is a card I've had in the deck for a while, but I haven't actually gotten to use either or use yet, but I mean, I don't necessarily think this hand is going to get to the Hullbreaker Horror, but it
depends on what we draw for sure.
Yeah, it's at least a piece of a combo, so it really kind of hits everything. It's got ramp, it's got interaction, it's got draw, and it's got a little combo piece. So I'd keep it.
Let's just take a little sneaky peek at what the first few draws are. So we got Vampiric Tutor that we draw for turn, and then we're looking at Mana Confluence and Feed the Swarm off of the Preordain. Feel like maybe we bottom both, or do we want to keep that Mana Confluence and just keep our land drops coming?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I would definitely be vamp tutoring for like a mana crypt.
Yeah, I guess with the vamp tutor, that leaves us open to... Do we get to a turn 2 Toxrill that way?
5, 6, 7 off of turn 1.
Seems like the best.
It would be.
We can. We turn 1 preordain, then we turn 2 upkeep Vampiric Tutor, and...
Oh, I guess, yeah, no, I forgot about the turn 1.
Yeah, I think that the best we can do is getting up to 6.
If, like, off the top I draw the Vampiric Tutor, I think I would just not cast the preordain and just do the Vamp Tutor on end of turn and go for the turn 2 Toxrill.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
There's also, I mean, you know, a pod composition thing to consider. If I'm looking at it like this turn 2 Toxrill is just going to eat interaction and be done, then instead I would preordain, go for the Vamp Tutor on turn 2, and go for turn 3 Toxrill with Dispel Protection. And if I'm looking at it that way, then the Mana Confluence off the preordain I would keep there for sure, just to have that mana.
What is that? What is that like between wanting to slam the early Toxrill and wanting to get it there with some sort of like dispel backup? Because as a person who used to play Toxrill a lot as well, like it definitely it's you're living off the table's fear, and they definitely are saving interaction knowing that you have the powerhouse in the command zone. So like it's always enticing to keep up that dispel, but like you certainly do. It's possible to lose a lot of tempo on your opponents by waiting to keep up that dispel mana. Is there any sort of like, are we rule of thumbing it, but just by pod composition, or do you like generally like to wait for counter backup? How do you like to attack it?
If you know, it definitely is situation to situation, but it does come down to that tempo. Like, do I feel like how wild was turn 2? Does it look like things are really going? And sometimes I've made the decision in a way that I can't go back, and I just have to go for 8 mana Toxrill basically with the protection. If it doesn't seem egregious, I will always try to have some sort of backup for it, because once it's 9 mana, you're basically playing without your commander, except for as a win con. So
it's really brutal, especially if you like have committed your opening hand to the plan of casting Toxrill, and like if you don't necessarily have the pieces to bounce back from that, it is a really devastating tempo play to get that countered. Are we on like misdirection or daze? How deep are we on like free counters in this deck?
Got neither of those. Just have the
forces.
I don't even have fierce in here right now. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I suppose that like fierce is one of those ones I was always on the fence about too in deck building, because like it's not getting there for the most part, and the thing that you're really worried about is protecting that Toxrill, and a lot of that fight is happening on the stack before it hits the board.
Yeah, a general kind of like deck building philosophy I have with this deck is that like Toxrill and the deck exist pretty much separately from each other. Like I try to make the 99 be as little dependent on Toxrill as possible, since it's so expensive. It has such a big target on its head. It just seemed better to have a very good, you know, blue-black control 99 with Toxrill there as like the only card that really is in the deck just for Toxrill is the Jeweled Lotus, and everything else, you know, works on some sort of axis without it, including like Grim Monolith or the Mana Vaults help cast Bolas' Citadel just as well. So not running the Fierce mostly because I'm just like so often don't have it in play.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense if you're really thinking about those pieces independently of one another, because yeah, like we can do a lot better than having a 3 mana counter, even if it is like fairly easy to cast. Like there's a lot of other options we can have to just make the core deck stronger, and I definitely like building that by that philosophy as well. Well, let's take a look at a fresh one here. Our next one is Island, Dramatic Reversal, Phantasmal Image, Bloodstained Mire, Peer into the Abyss, Chrome Mox, and Snow Covered Swamp. So seems like it's just a little bit too sparse.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a pile. Nothing's really looking too good. I don't know, if I'm like playing against Sage, sometimes I'll just keep a Phantasmal Image hand no matter what. I'm like, they're going to play a dockside turn 1, so I might as well be able to copy it. But
we've already recorded an episode of Greedy Keeps with Sage on Omnath, so actually, yeah, given that knowledge and what everything I know now, even previously all that knowledge, this is an S tier keep against Sage of Fables with only one artifact to feed the dockside and then your own dockside to profit afterwards. Definitely a turn 2 Toxrill, no doubt.
Yeah, or
unless
like a
you're
turn
dead.
2 here, like it could be really good there, but I think most of the time I'm probably pulling this hand.
All right, so in every other universe, let's take a look at the second 7. Second 7 is the Meathook Massacre, Dimir Signet, Scalding Tarn, Tainted Pact, Gemstone Caverns, Everflowing Chalice, and Necropotence. This seems like close.
Yeah, it's like, again, a little bit all over the place. You got a lot of like decent ramp. It's just like wants that third land so bad.
Yeah, like we're technically there on the Dimir Signet, possibly for turn 3 if we like hit the extra land for the turn 2 Necropotence, but otherwise we're not there.
This is like almost better going first so that you can keep the Gemstone Caverns, and that's never the kind of hand you want to be looking at.
Yeah, so what do you think? Just a little bit too awkward to keep this one then?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, let's take a look at 6. 6, we got Flusterstorm, Arcane Signet, the Meathook Massacre, Cavern of Souls, Jeweled Lotus, Wishclaw Talisman, and Mana Confluence. This looks like pretty close.
Yeah, I'd keep this hand, honestly. Like, I know it's not
it's not super flashy, but again, we don't want to go super low, so it's like, how much do we really want to ask of this opener when we have good things like Wishclaw, Jeweled Lotus, and Flusterstorm to begin the early game with?
Yeah, and depending on what decks I'm playing against, it's between the Wishclaw or the Meathook Massacre getting bottomed. Like, if I think I'm gonna see a bunch of dorks come out, Massacre's gonna stay and hopefully get a big tempo swing that way. Otherwise, Wishclaw probably stays to try to get out the Toxrill, because it's close to a turn 3 Toxrill probably. I don't know, maybe not. Because no, you have to.
We have to hit the land drop somewhere along the line to make sure we have the extra land for it. But if we do hit that third land drop, yeah, we're there on it. That's interesting. I was thinking that maybe the bottom might be between the Massacre and the Arcane Signet, but I guess I don't particularly know what we're Wishclaw Talismaning for. And yeah, like I guess without like Breach and without Ad Nauseam, those like super powerhouse spells, I guess is Wishclaw something that we're like. That's a thing that we're trying to save for later on in the game. We're not trying to like burn that early game for some sort of advantage spell.
Yeah, no, it's usually like not a card I'm super hot on in the deck because I am not on a fast combo. So I have it there because it's a nice way, you just cast it whenever, and then it's a nice 1 mana tutor for the rest of a Ice Crown Scepter combo. But typically, I don't know, like this hand, I think it would go on the bottom, and I'd just be happy about being able to go turn 2 Signet and hold up Flusterstorm, and then turn 3, hopefully you've hit a land in those first 3 draws, and you have Toxrill ready to go.
Yeah, and then I guess, again, depending on pod composition, whether or not we want to keep Wishclaw or Meathook Massacre, we can either be working towards, like, pivoting between the turn 3 Toxrill or Meathook or the turn 3 Wishclaw to try to piece something together, if that's where we happen to be at that point in the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. The deck is feeling... I've been messing with it, I feel like, a little too much, and it's in a little bit of a weird space. But it's also, I don't know, at Command Fest, it did really well. I won a good majority of the games I played, so I don't know. It's a pile, but it does the thing.
It's really easy in brewing to, like, sort of lose the forest for the trees, as they say, and like when you're thinking about the really individual slots like Wishclaw Talisman and things, it's really easy to get like overwhelmed with how many possibilities there are for individual slots and like start to get in that place where like things feel funky. But yeah, just playing the games, like, it's a lot easier to see how the pieces smooth themselves out in that sort of fashion. One thing that I've been thinking about more recently, along the lines of Wishclaw Talisman, is Scheming Symmetry, and this is just an aside, but I've just been thinking more about that spell for these sorts of decks that sort of have fewer really explosive things that they're trying to go for, and we're just trying to get a one-shot off. Like, there's this potentially smaller downside for scheming symmetry if we've got a high density of like preordained effects and things like that. I don't know, just something I've been thinking of.
For sure. No, super interesting card.
Shout out to Bonnie Jo Burton, who is the reason why I'm always thinking of that card. All right, let's take a look at one last one before we get out of here. So
Sounds good.
This first one here is Pact of Negation, Time Twister, Polluted Delta, Feed the Swarm, Mana Confluence, Underground Sea, and Cyclonic Rift. So seems like no ramp, no real plan outside of Time Twister to refresh.
Yep, just pile city on this one. Definitely going to second 7.
All right, second 7, we got Peer into the Abyss, Wishclaw Talisman, Vampiric Tutor, Gilded Drake, Otawara, Soaring City, Feed the Swarm, and an Offer You Can't Refuse. Seems like another ship.
Big time punished on that land there. I mean, not that it would really be keepable if that were like a makes both, but you could at least argue that you could Vamp Tutor into at least being able to turn to the Gilded Drake. But yeah, here you got nothing going on.
All right, let's take a look at 6 here. Is Chain of Vapor, Pathway, Mnemonic Betrayal, Sunken Ruins, Thassa's Oracle, Cyclonic Rift, and Grim Monolith. At 6, this seems not bad.
Yeah, exactly. 4 or 6, bottoming a Thoracle, and you're really not holding up a whole lot. But you at least have some bounce spells that are interesting, and like if someone gets stopped early, you've got the Mnemonic Betrayal to capitalize on it, and a Grim Monolith to come down to get you up to 5 mana. So I don't know. I definitely would keep it. I wouldn't be expecting like the hottest game off of it, to be completely honest. But I think it's got enough going on that going lower feels worse than just seeing if I can make it work.
That's fair. Do we ever cast Mnemonic Betrayal in this deck like earlier on in the game if we're just trying to like value get a couple of Lotus Petals or something like that to help ramp into Toxrill, or is it like really strictly like most like decks using it just sort of like end game finisher, we're getting someone to Underworld Breach and we're winning?
I mean, something that I love about the card is like when those odd times come up when you're like turn 3 Mnemonic Betrayal and it's just really good. Like yeah, it hits a couple Lotus Petals, or you know, someone popped someone else like a Jeweled Lotus, you know, someone else uses a Jeweled Lotus early to get something down, and I can just piece together like an early Toxrill off of it. So another reason this hand is more keepable than maybe it really looks like is that there's a chance that the early Mnemonic Betrayal does some work, and there's a chance that like I said, like someone gets stopped, and so we get some nice pieces in there. I've put together some seriously wonky wins with Mnemonic Betrayal, so I'm very high on that card right now.
It's a fantastic card. Like I haven't met anyone who doesn't think very highly of this card, because I feel like that's just like the social circle that I run in, and like I've played it a lot and won with it a lot, so like people that I know like have seen that it's a great card. But if you're out there and you don't think Mnemonic Betrayal is the best card, you should be running it in your Dimir Plus decks. Like it's just so fantastic.
Yeah, it's great basically all the time. You gotta love a card that just does so many things.
It's one of those things where I feel like it was hard for me to imagine how powerful the card was until I cast it a few times and saw like how many different ways it just wins the game every time you resolve it.
100%. No, it didn't come in here into Toxrill until I don't know, maybe I guess it was like a month or even longer ago, but when it did, and when I finally got to cast a few times, I was like, oh no, this card is like stupidly powerful. Especially
if you're not on things like Ad Nauseam and things like that like really help cross the finish line like that. And Dimir definitely has a problem with like crossing that finish line in those really overwhelming ways where you like get sorts of huge card advantage like that, because like obviously we can Ad Naus, but it's a lot harder to ritual out post Ad Nauseam and keep up a lot of counter magic to force it through. We don't have silences, we don't have Veil of Summer and other things to that effect. So something smaller in a package like Mnemonic Betrayal is like really, really explosive for this kind of deck with more limited options.
Yep. Yeah. No, I lost to my own Ad Nauseams a few times with this deck, and just
many. Yeah, same.
That was not where we were. So
you were braver than I was. I stopped playing the deck before I took the Ad Nauseam out. They couldn't take it from me.
I had to believe. I had already changed my stupid username on Twitter, so you know.
All right, well, since we're on greedy keeps here, we did decide to keep the 6, but let's take a look at a 5 anyway and see if we get punished. We did. This is no good.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah, Cephalid Coliseum, Exotic Orchard, Muddle the Mixture, Pact of Negation, Thassa's Oracle, Arcane Signet, Dramatic Versal. No way. No, we were better at our 6. We did fine.
This is a hand where I like bottom the Pact and the Thoracle and cry about how I'm gonna actually try to transmute that muddle into a scepter and just like hope that wins somehow. So yeah.
Yeah, that won't do it. But no, we had some good ones tonight. This was really, really fun. Really fun to get to sit down with you and talk about this deck, Cyrus. It's been a second since I've really taken a deep dive on it, and really great to talk with you and really get into the sort of the inner machinations of how this deck works in these individual pieces. So thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us. Do you want to do one more quick plug before we get out of here?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, first of all. Super fun and always great to kick it with you. And yeah, Mental Misplay, mentalmisplay.com will take you to all the different places we do stuff. And, well, I don't know. Well, this probably won't be out in the next 4 days, so I won't plug a time-limited thing that we have.
It will not.
Yeah, I just thought, I was like, oh, we're not streaming. That's tight
Not quite. Well, no, perfect. Thank you, Cyrus. This was so much fun. This was really, really great. Check out the video description below. You can find links to Cyrus and Mental Misplay, and also, of course, the deck list for this deck. And hit up the Patreon down there and everything else. And thanks so much for hanging out. We'll see you next time on Greedy Keeps. All right. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, one of the best ways to support us is by leaving a comment and hitting that like and subscribe button. It's incredibly helpful and always appreciated. If you want to support the channel more directly, join our Patreon to catch episodes early, join our private Discord, and get some other awesome benefits. One final thank you to all of our patrons who make great content like this possible. And thank you for watching. Be good to yourself, everyone.